Now, GarageBand for iOS, as we all know, is a great way to get into music. You can press a button and the thing will play a drum rhythm, or you can get a bass line, or we can use loops. It's all very, very useful. But what happens when you want to tweak something? Maybe you want to get a completely sort of individual sound, which is the difficulty here. The sounds are exceptionally good, but they're all the same on all the iOS devices. So what I'm going to try and do is work mostly with the drums, and I'm going to show you how you can exercise just a little bit more control over both the sounds and the rhythmic sort of feel. So I'm going to go to a new song, go to my drums and beat sequencer, and I'm going to pick one of the latest sounds that's been added to the sound library, and that is the sort of new disco thing. Let's have a look. Recently added, it's under the Prismatica. There we go, modern disco. Okay, we like that. That's great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of the the shaker at the moment, just to deal with the hi-hats, the kick drum and the snare drum. I'll take the clap away as well, and I'm going to put the hi-hats so that it's a standard 8-beat. So I've just done a little bit of tweaking. So first step, tweak what you've got to your own specification. Now, the only trouble with this is that we've got the other things as well. That's okay, we can just add more, or we can specify the loop length. Maybe we could take it take it down, but I'm actually going to adjust these, not only because you get a sort of more variety, but actually you can start tweaking things like the velocities as well. So, and we can put open hi-hats. It's very easy to have a loop that's too short, so you end up with something that just sounds extra predictable. So I'll just put the hi-hats there. Now while we're here, we can change the velocity of some of these sounds. The hi-hats, usually when you play the hi-hats, you'll have the first, third, fifth and seventh hits will be louder than the even numbers. So I'm just going to take this down slightly. If you hold it, you get finer control. There we go. So I'm just going to listen to that first bar, and you'll hear the difference between this and the second bar, where all the hi-hats are equal. So I'd want to just tweak them a little bit. I'll go on to the third one as well. Now of course, if you vary the velocities ever so slightly across the entire thing, you end up with quite a nice sort of variety. So at the end of the second bar, I'm going to have an open hi-hat instead of the closed hi-hat. Let's have a listen to that. Now I'm just going to make that open hi-hat a little bit quieter. Now I'm going to leave it at that for now. So I'm going to press record and let this thing play through. Okay, I've got one open hi-hat, that's okay. I'm going to set my section now to 4 bars instead of 5. If you keep recording and you go into the next beat, it will keep adding. So I've got 4 bars now. Okay, so if I go back to my main window, I've got my one drum rhythm there. What I'm going to do now is, because I've got 3 different instruments, I've got kick, snare and hi-hats, I'm going to duplicate this track twice. Now, what I'm going to do here is to edit this, and I'm only going to have my kick drum. Oh, kick drum and snare drum. Sorry, kick drum only. There we go. And then there we go. So I'm just going to delete those. There we go, done. Now I'm going to undo that quickly, because actually I want to duplicate this. I want to copy it and put it on the other tracks. Now I've got 3 tracks that are the same, but on the first track I want only kick drum. So I'll just close that, just get that, draw all that across there, delete those. Okay, there's my kick drum only. On this one I want my snare drum only. So there's a snare at the top. Delete that. And then on my final track I only want the hi-hats. Edit. Now, why am I doing this? Why am I taking all of this and putting it onto single tracks? Well, this is what used to be done. You have your mics on your drum kit. You'd have your mics on your drum kit, and then you could control all of those instruments separately. So you could put reverb on the snare only, for example. Now if I just go back and play this now, you'll hear the original rhythm, but now I've got complete control over the volumes, the overall volumes of those drums. I know you can do this in the editor as well, but it's a sort of global thing. Okay, that's great. We like that. Now, with some of these old tunes, what used to be done back in the day was to overload the input channels of your mixing desk so that those drums would distort a bit and be a bit flabby. We like this. And also the hi-hats may be just a little bit lower in treble content. Now this is where you can start tweaking individual sounds. So if I just take the treble down a little bit on the hi-hats, okay, now the snare drum, I'm going to change the pitch. I'm going to have a little go at changing that sound. Now, there are 2 ways of doing this. Either you can merge the track and then try something, or I'm going to actually do this as a plug-in. So, now that's not to say that the original sound isn't any good, because actually it's very good. But I'm going to go into the vocal transformer and see what happens. Already the sound has been transformed away from the original sounds. Suddenly it doesn't sound like that snare drum anymore. So this is where you can really tweak something. Now ideally you'd record your other parts, like a bass part and your keyboard parts, and then you might come back to the drums and say, well actually I'm not so sure about that now. But the point is I'm showing you how to really get into the sort of different sounds that are possible here. Now let's make this so that it sits a bit better in terms of rhythm. We have this thing called the groove. Now if I go into the hi-hats only, there we go, I'm now going to stretch the page out until we see the snap to grid off message at the top. Now what that does is it enables you to shift those drums in time by a tiny amount. So if I select all of these hi-hats now, and I'm going to drag them slightly to the right. Let's hear what it sounds like now. Those hi-hats appear to be dragging slightly with respect to that bass and the snare, which gives it a much more sort of different inflection. I mean, if I go a bit further, it won't sound very nice at all. We're not so sure that I'm into that. Now this does mean that your other parts, let's pick a bass guitar now. Now I'm a bass player, so I can play the fretboard here, but it doesn't matter. You can set something to auto play. Now, the sounds are great on this. Now, I'm going to try something. Now, I want to change the quantization of this, so make it a swing 16th. Now, a lot of this has to do with what those hi-hats are doing, because I've changed the hi-hats slightly. It's going to affect the overall timing of everything else. So if I go into the bass guitar now and I try very light 16th swing, now, I ideally want to make that bass part a little bit more realistic sounding, so there are a couple of ways I could do this. For example, I could merge this as a track, which is what I'm going to do. The reason I'm going to merge this is because then I can put it on a bass amp track, rather than, because you can't drag a part like this onto a bass track. It has to be made an audio track first. So if I go to the bass only and merge, it now turns it into a blue audio file. And then if I go, I'm going to add an amplifier, bass. Okay, let's see what happens now. Go back to the main window. If I drag that bass part onto that bass amp. Okay, it's different. Whether or not it's better or not, I don't know. But it's different. You're getting sounds here. The bass guitar sound on iOS, yeah, it's great. It's really good. But there are things that you can do just to further tweak it. So I'm going to get rid of that now, just so I've got my tracks. So let's have a go at a Fender Rhodes maybe. Now, this is basically one of the main electric pianos of the late 60s to early 1980s, and I'm just going to put a chord. Okay, here we go. Now, the screen sort of dragged there. I think I had like a 3-finger sort of gesture it thought I was trying to close something. That's okay. I'm just going to edit what was there. So I'm going to let's make those notes longer. Now, that last chord was too loud, so I'm just going to get the velocity of these and bring it down. Now, there's a couple of fluffy moments there, but I'm going to quantize this to the same level that I quantized the bass. Swing light 16th. That's all right. Now, this is where I'm going to get a bit funky with it. I'm going to take the reverb and the echo off, and I'm also going to just go into the piano itself and take the chorus and tremolo off. Now, this makes it sound like a plain Fender Rhodes piano. I used to have one of these. It's just heavy but lovely. There we go, so it's a plain sound now. There's nothing sort of washy, movie about stuff. So I'm now going to merge that so that I can put it through a guitar amp. Now, the Fender Rhodes piano, you can either get piano, or you could get the one with the speaker cabinet as well, the suitcase, which had those tremolo settings on it. But if you just had the piano, lots of people used to put them through a Fender amp of sorts. Let's have a look. We've got the, I think, the brown face Fender here somewhere. Oh, well, let's try it through this one. So there's my Fender amp combo, and then I'm going to put my piano on that. Just sounds like an angry Rhodes through a guitar amp that somebody's mic'd up. So we've taken the Rhodes from its original context and just put it somewhere else. Now, of course, lots and lots of different things can be done with this, but don't be satisfied just to use the sounds that are there. Good though they are, have a go at doing a bit of tweaking and a bit of rhythmic sort of, rhythmic sort of tweaking as well. If I was to take the bass guitar, for example, there we go, maybe I could have a go at making that bass drive a bit more. Now, if we want that, I'm going to add 1 bar to this. Sorry, section A, I need to make it 5 bars. There we go. There is, okay, it thought I was trying to cut. Luckily there are enough undo steps that that can be prevented, but I'm just going to put an extra bar at the end. Make sure that loop function is off, because by default it'll loop what you've got to whatever degree. Then I'm going to select all, bring it all along to bar 2, and then the bass part I'm going to have a go and see what happens if I make it slightly ahead of the beat, ever so slightly. So it's changed the rhythmic inflection again. On Logic you can get the drums will either push or pull the beat, or sort of push the beat forwards or pull back on it. So you can do lots and lots of things like that. I could make the Rhodes maybe slightly behind. Now, of course, you can't move stuff unless there is space at each end. Now that's just a bit more sort of, it sounds a bit more like a band playing rather than everything strictly on that beat. So I could do this with a guitar. I could record one of the software guitars and then put it through an amplifier or do anything else with it. Now, the other thing that happens on lots of these sort of older records, I've just opened the effects track here, is that very often the treble fidelity is perhaps a little bit lower, especially if you're dealing with a sort of that early 70s sound, and maybe not so much bass. So if I record just now, in order to tweak this, you have to record a little bit of the effects track, just something. That'll do. Okay. So if I close this down now, you can see that there's a little tweak that I made on the effects track. Now I'm going to delete what was there. Notice the effects track remains. So I'm going to have a little tweak of the audio on this now, going into the visual EQ. So this is like a master equalizer. It just sounds like you've just stuck a 7-inch record on your machine, and it's just a bit grim. We like this. Now you can also, of course, you can add distortion maybe to that kick drum as well. You can try something like that. Let's have a look. That sounds fairly furry. And there's something you can just tweak to your heart's content. And of course, if you download the plugin Final Touch, you can master this up as well and make it sound really grim. Now you can, yeah, grim is good. We like grim because it's edgy. It's got a bit of soul to it. Don't be afraid to mash things up.